Hi, everybody. So for a bit of a change of gears from monitoring and certification and coffee research. So I am an expert on neither of these, but it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. Very humbling and enriching. And what I do is manage global engagement efforts by BASF Agricultural Solutions with smallholders, small-scale farmers. And before I begin, let me also extend a big thank you to colleagues who could not be here today with me, but are making this possible. So Rosa Ines in Mexico and my colleague Elizabeth here that really drive this forwards. And most importantly, probably the teams and the folks out in the fields in Mexico and in Chiapas that do the good work, especially in pretty complex, geopolitically complex conditions. So Kajve, this is a tzotzil, so it's one of the languages spoken in the south of Mexico. It's the word for coffee. It's an initiative of ours with smallholders. And that's actually where I would like to begin with a very short preamble. How do I switch to the next slide?
You can press the button there. Yes.
Thank you. So, not to preach to the choir, I think none of this will be particularly new to the folks here, but smallholders and BASF Agricultural Solutions, what's the link? Admittedly, not usually the #1 focus of all, but it is important and there is a real thematic nexus. What is it? Of course, smallholders worldwide in Mexico and beyond play a fundamental role in the likes of food security, but also being embedded in rural landscapes, in varied landscapes, in the provision and maintenance and upkeep of ecosystem services, anything from water cycles to, of course, climate regulation, adaptation and mitigation strategies, preservation of biodiversity. We also got some coffee-specific insight on that earlier. And yet, of course, they are usually the disadvantaged and face a number of structural constraints, which we all know will require a whole host of solutions and piecing together the insight and the capabilities of different stakeholders and different actors. So the role, naturally, and we have a role to play and a commitment as BASF Agricultural Solutions, is to empower them through projects and efforts that we drive in Mexico and elsewhere that are knowledge-based, ecosystem-based, and that leverage innovation and technology in a targeted way. And most importantly here also that work through partnership to achieve scale and that measure impact adequately. So this is the preamble, and with this, I'll take you back a few years to when this began, to let's say between 2018 and the start of 2019. I think as coffee experts, you probably know the context much better than I do between the general issues in market access and fluctuating prices, especially for smallholders in tropical Mexico and very remote regions, combined with a very serious outbreak of coffee leaf rust in 2012 and in following years, just kind of persisted. And of course, the climate conditions which we're really seeing, in highland areas between the changing rainfall patterns, generally warmer temperatures, offbeat events. There was a real issue that was observed, and also a note that is related, of course, that we also saw later. This pushes sometimes smallholders that have maybe some small plot and neighboring forest to also clear this, to expand plantations in order to be able to maintain overall income. There was the opportunity here for the colleagues as part of our work on stewardship, training, building knowledge and access and outreach to the smallholder farmers, to work together with UNESCO and some local partners, local retailers and folks in the coffee value chains there, to launch this effort to improve the quality of life of smallholders by increasing and stabilizing production, to tackle this kind of triple whammy that I mentioned earlier. And the core of the initial activities was a lot of outreach work out in the field. So the more typical extension services and face-to-face farm visits, setting up demo plots, and also working through local cooperatives to be able to catch groups and communities of farmers. And training was really focused on essentials, on integrated pest management, good agricultural practices, especially as these farmers would also access the value chain with this. The core of BASF activities, also safe usage of personal protective equipment, container management and clean field programs, and also outreach on environmental protection and managing natural resource base in the area. A lot of the communities where we were working then are located inside of biosphere reserves in Chiapas. So all the more delicate, let's say. What was lovely then in this first phase was also the collaboration with UNESCO, which carried out let's say, an ethnographic, socioeconomic study to characterize the nexus between coffee growing and community heritage. This work was done in indigenous communities, 37 of them to date. And the idea was to really understand what is the role, what are the tenets, what are the practices that are done, how is this significant in daily life, and how can more, let's say, modern and in coffee growing practices and innovation and this outreach be compatible and inclusive, especially with regards to women and youths. Youth because of the sort of intergenerational challenges, and of course women because, as we said, they are very often out there doing most of the work. And there were some early successes and noise that was made. I'll start from the bottom here. What you see here is the cover of this wonderful report by UNESCO, which is now also publicly available in their repository. It's a monster of 150 pages going quite deep through, let's say, case studies and survey evidence on the cultural heritage, material and intangible, and the biocultural tenets of coffee growing. These are just some numbers to show that the kind of combination of this outreach and the technology and the good practices, good agricultural practice, did result in more stable production, considerably higher production, and much increased control of rust. Also some qualitative increases, for example, in cup quality. And this was well recognized also at the end of last year, 2023. The UN Global Compact in Mexico awarded this initiative the first place award in the prosperity category of the Logra Awards. So also some news on that available on the internet. And in extending this effort, we also at the same time partnered with CIAT, the International Center of Tropical Agriculture, to do a kind of another baseline study with a view to the topics of climate change adaptation and mitigation, looking at carbon footprint, deforestation trends or land use change trends, and also water usage. And this was very insightful in understanding where we could go, and combining also action on these topics, of course, with livelihoods, with sustainable production. What this has resolved in as a extended leg and effort in Kajve is more, let's say, even more intricate. This is necessary nowadays. We all talk about multi-stakeholder partnership, cooperating for the Sustainable Development Goals, and this is, you know, actually taking a stab at this. So cooperation with civil society organizations, so Solidaridad, with research institutions, and also local value chain actors. So you see an important partner that has really worked here in the outreach, out in the field with the farmers, so Maggioni, to work on all these challenges, you know, resilience and the livelihoods, as well as the natural resource base and this knowledge transfer that is so crucial in you know, true empowerment of growers. So if I have a couple more minutes to spend on giving a flavor of what are the activities, you know, talking about a holistic approach, you know, for advancing the sustainability of coffee production, what's actually in this. Couple of mentions is, of course, major focus in terms of the cropping system is agroforestry, reviving it, restoring it, looking at targeted improvements of how it is done traditionally, with a focus on polyculture, so using native species and setting up, designing a system that can actually deliver several ecosystem services beyond, of course, yields of high quality, you know, and demonstrably sustainable coffee. So it's a whole chapter of its own, but looking at how the canopy, you know, above the head of coffee trees can really provide a lot of buffers to climate extremes, can really do a lot of good for the soil and managing nutrients, can also provide habitat niches, especially as you know, have a continuum between, you know, the native forest and more intense agricultural land use. So there's a whole chapter there, and especially looking at the landscape level effects is as complicated as it is interesting, and something that we're turning our attention to now. Community and gender inclusion, and also the bit about deforestation has a lot to do with the community outreach beyond the farmers themselves. So education, you know, targeted reforestation efforts in the communities, a focus also in schools and with, you know, the households there. On the agronomic side, of course, integrated pest and disease management, so all of the trainings on best practices, ensuring that where crop protection products are used, that they're used adequately with a clear plan and a clear, you know, management idea behind them, integrating cultural and physical control methods. On the side of nutrient management, of course, also a lot to do. So the whole topic of the regenerative approach to soil health. And here there's also an issue with pollution in the case of coffee when you look at the wastewater. So, you know, definitely more on that. And then the strengthened model, and this is also the commercial bit. And this is probably the note that I would end on as also a bit of a call to action, is, of course, we have, you know, data collection and documentation of the methodology of this ongoing on the technical side, but also the idea is to bring all of this together and to match the incentive, you know, to achieve incentive alignment for the farmers to really adopt these, you know, beyond demonstration sites and the small scale piloting. Of course, this requires achieving this integration in formal value chains with some stability and continuity. So we've already demonstrated that the improvement in coffee quality enabled them to achieve a premium with the value chain, besides, of course, the yield effect. But the idea, of course, here ultimately is a self-sustaining commercial model for the smallholders, and, of course, for the landscape around them. So this does depend on a stable stakeholder ecosystem. This is the challenge between working with this variety of actors. So I'll conclude, of course, inviting you to reach out if you're interested in knowing more about this and, you know, what's behind this. And also happy to share the reports that I showed if you're interested in the details.
Grazie Filippo. Thank you.